What do Kim Jong-un and Xi Jinping want to get out of their recent meeting?
Obviously, North Korea needs to lighten the economic pressure that it's faced ever since its nuclear and missile tests of 2017, and the Chinese willingness to really put more pressure on North Korea economically than had ever been the case before. I think this is the simplest explanation for Kim Jong-un's charm offensive. There are other explanations that contribute perhaps as well, such as the fact that now he has a more elaborate nuclear weapons capability, and maybe he feels more confident in that capability, and he's also perhaps afraid a little bit of President Trump's threats. But I think the Chinese economic pressure is the main reason why he's shown more interest in diplomacy. So now I think he's trying to establish good rapport with various countries that he had been neglecting or ignoring or been bellicose towards. And with China in particular, he obviously hopes that even without necessarily making all the concessions that Washington will demand, even without complete denuclearization in the immediate future, that there will still be a lessening of Chinese economic pressure. I think he's trying to set the table for that kind of a deal with Washington because he understands that President Trump really wants complete denuclearization to happen very fast. I don't think that's realistic. And the most important thing for President Kim to do in his own calculus is to improve relations with South Korea and China to the point where he will get some economic relief even prior to any complete denuclearization. And so I think that's probably much of the subject matter and also much of the overall purpose of these meetings. For the Chinese, they want a stable situation on the Korean Peninsula. They would like to see these talks be successful. I certainly hope they're telling President Kim that Washington does mean business. And even if there could be a phased approach towards denuclearization, it's going to have to be a serious process, and it's going to have to begin with some significant North Korean steps, like dismantling the nuclear weapons production infrastructure that has led to a growing arsenal in recent years. So those are some of the messages and purposes that I expect led to the Kim-Xi summits in recent weeks.
How will President Trump's exit from the Iran deal affect his upcoming talks with Kim Jong-un?
Well, I would expect that North Korea would have two main observations about the Iran nuclear deal. One of them is that it's for a problem a long ways away, a country a long ways away, a much different situation, especially because Iran has been aggressive throughout the broader Middle East. And that's something that threatens American interests and American allies in a way that North Korea, for all of its main and big problems, does not threaten the United States the same way regionally. It is not actively stoking terrorism or violence in other countries the way that Iran is. So the first observation that I believe Kim would have is that Iran is a long ways away and a different problem. But the second observation would be that perhaps he can use Iran as a bit of bargaining leverage. And he can say to President Trump, do you really think I can give up my nuclear arsenal entirely and immediately in a situation where I have reason to doubt that a future American president would respect the deal that you're now willing to make with me? And maybe even if you promise never to threaten military force against North Korea, maybe a future president would change his or her mind the same way that you, President Trump, changed the American position on the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action with Iran. And in other words, Kim would use that as a talking point and as a bargaining point of leverage in trying to point out to President Trump why complete and immediate denuclearization is really not realistic for North Korea. I hope that North Korea will completely denuclearize very fast, but I do not expect it. And I think Kim will be looking for ways to reduce the likelihood that he'll be put under a lot of pressure to achieve that complete and immediate denuclearization.
Will it also affect U.S.-China trade negotiations?
Well, when I was in Beijing this week, we had numerous Track 2 discussions with some very prominent Chinese scholars at various think tanks. And a number of them said to us, the American delegation from Brookings and other think tanks, they said that we don't really think these issues need to be linked, but all of us also acknowledged, or many of us acknowledged, that sometimes these issues are linked because the way in which leaders get along, the basic atmospherics of their relationship, can affect their ability to address a problem like North Korea. So even if we say that North Korea should be viewed on its own terms, it definitely tends to have some impact, just what happens in other sectors, like on issues of Taiwan, issues of trade, and so forth. So there's a partial separation of the topics, but there will not be complete delinkage. I don't think that's realistic.
Here's what Greg Autry has to say about this topic. Kim Jong-un visited China for the second time last week. What do Kim and Xi want, respectively?
You know, I wish I knew. I wish I could be a fly in that room and see what that conversation is about. In my personal opinion, the Chinese government has always used the North Korean government as a tool to off-put the United States geopolitically and militarily. Very often when the Chinese Communist Party needed a distraction from a tense U.S.-China issue, they would, I believe, provoke one of the Kims to move forward and create a situation that required the United States to then go supplicate to Beijing and ask for assistance in managing the Kim regime. The latest King Kim of Korea is now stepping forward, apparently, with this bold move to make peace, both with the South and potentially with the U.S. It's an interesting distraction, but again, these are not nations that believe in the rule of law, so I'm not sure what you get out of any agreement with them. As we've seen with North Korea before, no agreement that you make with that state is likely to be honored. So I will sit back and watch with great interest. As far as what Xi and Kim said, I suspect that Xi told Kim what to do, but who knows?
How will President Trump's exit from the Iran deal affect his upcoming talks with Kim Jong-un?
I think it underscores the fact that we're suddenly dealing with a U.S. president who isn't a lapdog to global perceptions of how geopolitics should be managed, but actually stands up for U.S. interests in a bold and straightforward way. The willingness to exit out of a badly conceived previous agreement, I think, makes it clear to Kim that he's dealing with somebody who will act forcefully in U.S. interests.